you describe yourself today, 1982?
As a middle-aged ex-pop star, I think.
Is that all?
I don't really, I don't know. It's a sort of funny question, I suppose. Ex-pop star, peace seeker, gardener.
Yes, you're...
Ex-celeb, until now again, of course.
Your own privacy, you obviously regard that very highly. And when John Lennon was murdered, how did that affect your lifestyle? More from a safety point of view or from an emotional point of view?
I think from both points of view. First of all, it was, I mean, obviously such a shock, because assassination is something which, you know, up until that time hadn't really got down to that level. I mean, it was always presidents and leaders like that. And I wouldn't think, you know, somebody who's a pop star was important enough to kill. You know, it's a terrible thing. I don't think anybody is important enough to kill, you know, really, and that. But I could see why, you know, there's assassinations with political leaders and stuff, just extremist. And obviously, if it could happen to him, it could happen to anybody, you know, who gets up on a stage or who walks out of a car. And, you know, so it was a bit scary from that side. You can't go around worrying. I mean, I think of it like, say, a plane crash. There's a friend of mine who was terrified. I think we've all been through that, you know, fear of flying. A friend of mine was terrified of flying, and in the end he decided to go to a psychiatrist. And instead of the psychiatrist saying to him the sort of thing you would expect, he said to him, it doesn't matter if you crash, you're not important. Which is true, really. It's like it's an ego thing of, I am going to crash. Me, I'm so important that I'm going to crash. But really, you know, that's another way of looking at it. You're not that important, don't worry, you know, it's... And the same thing goes for that, you know, for assassination. I would like to think, you know, I'm not that important.
While he mightn't be worried about protecting himself, George has been keeping an eye on this man, John Lennon's son, Julian. As he told us about Julian, George revealed some surprising things about the character of John Lennon. Things that he wouldn't like to see carried on by Julian as he launches his own career.
Julian happens to be very talented. He's really good. He's got a lot of good tunes. He's only just started to try and do lyrics. But he, apart from him physically looking like John a bit, with his glasses and long hair, he really isn't anything like John. He's more like his mother. He's much gentle, a softer person. John was like very tough. I mean, he had that ability to be gentle and soft and was lovely, but he was, you know, he was acid too. I mean, that he gave that hard edge to the Beatles.
Why do you think that was? What gave him that tough edge in his own personality?
Well, it may be because the way he was, you know, a sort of an orphan, as Popeye would say. He was an orphan, you know. Well, I mean, he didn't, his father left home, and, you know, all that, you've heard the songs. Mother, you left me, but I didn't leave you. But, you know, John was a real, you know, much harder, tougher person. Julian is, you know, gentle, and so I don't think there's any comparison, and it's unfortunate that, you know, that Julian is allowing himself to be, you know, interviewed or put in the newspapers and all that.
What about the comparison to today's music? You made the statement that today's music is an example of ugly, prancing egos. Could you give us an example of an ugly, prancing ego that we might see?
Well, I didn't catch any of the names too much, because as soon as I'd see them, I'd go, you know, those songs of, they just shout, and there's no melodies, no words worth talking about. And just, you know, the musicianship became so bad because we were pretty naive and we were very amateur in a way, but at the same time we tried to create interesting music, saying something, you know? I mean, these people aren't saying anything, and the reason why they're not saying anything is because they don't know anything. And that's a pretty strong statement, but it's true. I mean, I'm talking about probably 95% of them, and not just the pop or the punk or whatever, but the entire world of music. They, you know, maybe I'm just a fussy person, but you know, I want something to say something to enrich my experience. You know, I don't need somebody just hitting me on the head with a hammer. You know, that can't teach me anything.
Is there anybody who does that for you today?
Who enriches? Sure, it's Bob Dylan is the governor. I mean, if all he'd ever written was Blowing in the Wind, he's done much more than the average person. And there's musicians I like purely as musicians for fun, like Ry Cooder. I don't know if he's popular. He's a Warner Brothers artist, and he's a great guitar player, and he must have heard Ry Cooder. Anyway, he's ace, and I like my old pals like Eric Clapton, and, you know, out of the newer people, I don't know, I went gardening about 6 years ago, and I
What about Elton John?
Elton is, he is a really good entertainer. You know, he's very talented, but still, he doesn't say anything. Really, you know, okay, you know, Crocodile Rock and all that. I like Elton a lot, but there's a lack of depth of experience.
In those days...
Melbourne, 1964. One of the most successful and talked about concert tours ever in Australia. But as it turns out, the Beatles didn't really enjoy this tour, or for that matter, any tour. 18 years later, a relaxed George Harrison talked about the phenomenon that was the Beatles.
Well, to the music industry, it was a shot in the arm. I mean, there's no question about it. I saw the graph in the Financial Times in London, and, you know, the record business was going along like this, and it just went, shh, and it just, it's not just the music industry. After us, they went and signed everybody, especially from Liverpool, and, you know, everybody knows about what happened. It became a huge business, and it was not just that, though. It was the clothes, you know. I remember the Duke of Edinburgh once saying, what a great boost for British corduroy. All those things. I mean, that's why they gave us those leather medals, because, you know, it boosted fashion, and Britain just generally got a shot in the arm, and now they all gone back to being, you know, moaning again.
It was reported also that Yoko was quite instrumental in the breakup of the Beatles, the split. Is that true?
It was splitting long before that, really. You know, I mean, just the pressure when we stopped touring in, I mean, we only toured 2 years, really, like, I think 65 and 66 in, around the world. And it was just too much pressure. At the end of 66, we just decided, that's it. We'll just go in the studio and work there. We were doomed from the beginning because we were like monkeys in a zoo. And everybody needs space in order to grow, and I think that the public and the press split the Beatles probably more than Yoko or Linda McCartney.
In those days when it was super pressurized, the drugs and the alcohol, I mean, was it easy or difficult to rely on drugs to try and get you through those times? Because obviously you're very young, and in a very high-pressure business. Did you have to rely a lot on drugs and alcohol to make it through?
No, not rely on them. It's just that they were good fun at the time. I mean, it started, I was 17 when I first we went to Hamburg, and we were given a job in the Reeperbahn, which is the naughtiest part of Hamburg. And they booked us for 8 hours a night, and then the club we were in had to close down. The police shut it down, so they moved us into another club where there was another band also booked for 8 hours. So instead of giving us 4 hours each, we started at 2 in the afternoon, did an hour, and they did an hour, and we did an hour, and we went right through you know, till the following morning. And after we were, you know, by the second week of doing that, around about the 6th set, when we were flagging a bit, and the boss of the club, who was a bit of a gangster, brought all his gangster pals in, saying, you know, wanted us to jump up and down doing What Did I Say or something. So then they started slipping us these pills called Preludin, which were women's slimming pills. And we'd take them and froth at the mouth and leap up and down saying, what I say? And then they invented marijuana, and somebody gave it to us and we smoked it. And the best thing about that was that we used to drink whiskey. And the moment marijuana came, we just knocked the whiskey in the head. But, you know, it's just like anything. It was not bad. I always knew from when I was a kid, you know, seeing films about Chet Baker or, you know, these jazz people who OD'd on heroin. I never, ever wanted to know about heroin. I just kept away from it, and a lot of my friends died, and they're still dying, you know. But I think, well, I was a bit lucky. I felt I had a tilt mechanism. You know, I could get a bit loaded, but then I'd always cut out, okay, that's enough, and go and get straight. And after a while, you know, it sort of gets boring.
It's obvious, even after a short meeting with George Harrison, that he's a deeply religious man, far from fanatical, but living for his Lord. A year after the Australian tour, he met the Indian sitar player, Ravi Shankar. Thus began a close association not only with Indian music and yoga, but with Eastern religions, the laws of karma and Krishna.
My involvement in that gave me a much better understanding of certain things, and how I see it is that the soul is in this body for a period of time, and then it leaves the body. It's like, in a way, the body is like a suit that you put on.
Do you have any idea where it goes?
Yeah.
Where?
Well, the soul, I mean, Christ said in the Bible about the 3 cages for the bird of paradise, which is the soul being the bird of paradise, and the 3 cages being the 3 bodies that house the soul. And there's they call it the causal body, and then around that's the astral body, and then there's the gross physical body. So death is really when the physical body falls off, but the soul's still in 2 other bodies, so it's then on the astral level.
You hear a lot about astral travel today. People just sort of are lying there and they look above themselves or look down, and there they are. Have you ever astral traveled in that sense?
I had a strange experience when I was in Rishikesh. I went on a meditation course, I should say, not trip, where the object was to meditate deeper and deeper and deeper for longer periods of time. The goal is really to plug into the divine energy and to raise your state of consciousness and tune in to the subtler states of consciousness, and all those things like walking on the water and dematerializing your body at will are just sort of things that happen along the way. So it's hard to actually explain it, but it was just a feeling of just the consciousness traveling. I don't know where to, and it wasn't up, down, left or right. But it was just no body there, but at the same time you don't feel as though you're missing anything. You know, the consciousness is complete.
Supernatural. Do you believe in any of that supernatural phenomenon?
I once got involved with, when our first manager died, Brian Epstein, I had so many spiritualists calling me up saying Brian Epstein wanted to talk to me. In fact, I think I talked to him more after he died than I did when he was alive.
Really?
You know, and I just decided there's no point pursuing any of that.
Do you
because
think it was
they
all
all
a joke,
get...
though?
No, part of it is a joke, but there's some people can become mediums. Have anybody got an umbrella?
But what about superstition? Do you believe a lot in superstition?
I like all the odd numbers, you know. I'm not keen on 2, 4, 6, and 8. Thank you. Is this really necessary?
Yeah,
you may ask. Well, as you can see, it's raining here.
Only in my heart.
Whether or not we tempted the gods with our talk of the supernatural, the rains came down even harder. Shelter was nearby at the swimming pool changing shed, and although we were both a little wet, the conversation went on. Do you think life is all predetermined?
In some respects it is, although we do have control over our actions right at this moment. I think what we are now is the result of our past actions. What we're going to be is going to be the result of our present actions. As again they said in the Bible, that God is not mocked. Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. That means the law of karma, action, reaction. So we can, there's certain things that maybe there's no way out, like there's no way I wasn't going to be in the Beatles, even though I didn't know it. In retrospect, I can see that's what it was. It was a setup. But at the same time, I do have control over my actions, and I can, you know, do good actions or bad actions, or like I say, I could try being a pop star forever and going on TV and do concerts and be a celebrity, or I can be a gardener.